If you've ever said yes when you really wanted to say no, or felt guilty for putting your needs first, you are definitely not alone. In this video, we will unpack the real reason boundaries feel so hard for us Filipinos. And stay with me because I'm also going to give you a free tool that you can use today to set boundaries with more compassion and less guilt. Magandang umaga, hapon or gabi po sa inyong lahat. I'm Dr. Net. I'm a Filipino-American clinical psychologist. So I was born and raised in the Philippines and I immigrated here as a young adult. And then I later pursued graduate school in San Francisco. As a first-gen immigrant, I bring both personal and professional insight into the healing journey. Having grown up with anxiety and trauma, I deeply understand what it means to face mental health challenges. So I just want to be clear, okay? Because every time I talk about some of our toxic behaviors or toxic stuff that we are still doing in our community, I get DMs or I get comments that I am ashamed of being Filipino. But I just want to be clear because the exact opposite is true. I deeply love being Filipino. I love how we embody kapwa, how we practice pakikisama, and how we'll sacrifice for family. But that silence and that self erasure, these are the legacies that I really don't want to pass on to my own kid. Because if you've ever felt like, saying no made you a bad Filipino, I want you to listen to this. Many of us grew up believing that saying no meant being disrespectful or ungrateful, especially toward family. We were shaped by utang na loob, pakikisama, respect. These are really beautiful values, but they can also make boundaries feel unnatural. And don't forget, we also have this colonial history that trained us into silence. And under colonization, obedience, right? Like you really just needed to obey because otherwise it's going to cost you your life. It was not optional. So a lot of like our parents or grandparents, they have seen the war. They have gone through even just like recent administration, like even during the martial law period and even during the Duterte period, where they just have to keep quiet in order to survive. So if you've ever felt guilty for even thinking of saying no to a parent, like, type guilty in the comments because you are not alone. And by the way, to help you start untangling this guilt, I made a free guide, which is Navigating Filipino Boundaries. It is a script, and these are also kind of like an ebook that will help you with these issues. The link is in the description. And here's where it gets interesting as well. I wanted to also put the lens of Filipino psychology in this because this can really clear things up further for you. So there is this psychologist. He's also a priest, by the way, from Ateneo de Manila in the Philippines, Father Jaime Bulatao. He described that the Filipino self as a pritong itlog, right? He described the Filipino self as the fried egg. And that yolk is our personal self, but the whites, they spread out, blending with others in the pan. And unlike Western, psychology, where you have this hard-boiled egg idea, where it's really separate and contained. And with us Filipinos, it's more porous. And so that's why that white kind of like spreads out, which can be like really beautiful. And that's also the reason why we Filipinos are so flexible. Like, put us anywhere in the globe and we will thrive, we will survive because like we know how to do that pakikisama, which is like represented in that pritong itlog, like Father Jaime Bolata was explaining. We feel other people's emotions, we take on their struggles as if they're ours, right? So drop fried egg. If you've ever felt like your family's stress instantly become your stress. But, we're not just fried eggs. There's another anthropologist, his name is Prospero Kovar. He said that we're more like clay jars, which is like a banga. And the banga, or this jar, has three layers. We have the labas, which is the outside. This is kind of like how we look, how we act for others. And then we have the loob, which is the inside, which is like, represented by our feelings, our truth. And then we have the lalim, which is our depth, the hidden layers of meaning, beliefs, and experiences. And this depth is the profound richness of Filipino being, which encompasses culture, our history, our spirituality, and social roles. And without boundaries, many of us live only at the labas, which is the outside, performing respectability while our loob and lalim are neglected. So boundaries are what let us live in wholeness. And if you want to connect with that lalim, I also created this thing called pagbabalik na loob. This is like the 5 sacred steps so that you can begin your inner child healing journey. Link is also below in the description. So here's the real kicker. In Filipino culture, saying no to family doesn't just feel hard. It's like some people described it to me, right? Like it's almost like a betrayal. The ama ng psikolohiyang Pilipino is Virgilio Enriquez. He explained relationships through ibang tao, which is the outsider, and hindi ibang tao, which means one of us. So with outsiders, we keep our distance, right? We have the pakikitungo, pakikisalamuha. Pakikitungo in English means like, how you get along well with others. And the same thing with pakikisalamuha, right? Like how we go into that group harmony. But once someone is hindi ibang tao, meaning like once someone becomes one of us, they enter into our loob, right? In the inside, and we give, we sacrifice, we blend. And this is why saying no to family feels impossible. And honestly, this is also some of the reasons why, when I typically have a lot of like second gen Filipino Americans in my practice. And sometimes the disconnect happens because of this. Because the Filipino parent, they treat their kid as like hindi ibang tao. I mean, like they gave birth to this kid, they raised this kid, they clothed and fed this kid. So for a Filipino, kung yung ibang tao nga nagiging hindi ibang tao, and this can be just like friends, can you imagine if this was their own kid? Diba? Ang hirap is separate. It's so hard for them is separate because of this concept that Virgilio Enriquez was talking about. Because their kids, they are no longer hindi ibang tao. So sometimes I would get these complaints from my second gen Filipino American clients, and they're saying that, why are they still talking to me like I'm their young child? I am like 32 freaking years old. I am 37 years old. I am 40 years old, and they're still treating me like I'm their kid. And it is because of these concepts that Virgilio Enriquez is talking about. That's why boundaries can feel impossible sometimes. So I also just wanted to remind you that boundaries also aren't pushing family out. They're actually keeping kapwa alive without losing our sense of self, without losing us in the mix. Drop a yes if this resonates with you. By the way, inside Helam Collective, which is our membership for the Brown Psych, this is a membership that we host in school, which is spelled SKOOL. I actually teach this Filipino psychology concept step by step. And we have members from the US, from Canada, from the UK, from the Philippines. We are all in this healing our generational trauma through inner child healing and through psikolohiyang Pilipino and ancestral wisdom. So you don't have to be alone in this journey. So how do we heal this? How do we heal from this trauma of like not being able to create that boundary? Because that also creates so much turmoil growing up if we don't know how to say no, if we don't know how to create a boundary, especially like if you're living, for instance, like if you're a diasporic Filipino and you are dealing with like Western people who are like so blunt, who are so upfront, and sometimes they will really try your boundaries. And the answer, it lives in our inner child. Because when your inner child was taught that being good, quote unquote, good meant being quiet, saying yes, or carrying other people's needs before your own, you tend to grow up believing that your needs don't matter. And inner child healing lets you rewrite that story. It also gives you the courage to say, I can honor my family and I don't have to abandon myself. Or I can love others and still say no. Or some people will say, I can also choose my peace, not just keep peace. And to help you anchor, you can also download the free ebook that my daughter and I made. It's called Discover the Pre-Colonial Philippines. My daughter is a creative and she is amazing, and she helped me create this free ebook. The link is also in the description for you. If we also don't understand how our ancestors lived back then, right? If we don't know our history, how can we truly heal? And the next point that I wanted to make is boundaries are also not walls. Some people thought, especially like when they first just come to me and they're just like learning about like mental health and boundaries and all this stuff, which is, by the way, a necessary tool if you want good mental wellness. You really need boundaries. I want you to think of boundaries not as walls. Instead, I want you to think of boundaries more like a fence, right? That opens and closes. And you can open that fence for people who value you, who respect you, who understands your limitations. And I want you to keep that fence closed for people who are so toxic, depleting your energy, and do not understand that you're also human. And giving only what you can truly can also, I know that in our community there's also like some people taking advantage. Sometimes they think that just because like you're in America or just because like you're in a foreign country, you can give and give and give and you have like a bottomless well of gold, right? But with boundaries, right? With understanding that you also have your own needs and limitations, you are better able to set that boundary if you understand these, right? And these aren't rejections, they're acts of care for you and for your relationships. And again, boundaries aren't betrayal. They're in fact bridges, right? Connecting your loob with others while also protecting your lalim, which is like what's inside you. And if you want to go deeper, come join us inside the Healam Collective. We are a membership of Filipinos breaking intergenerational trauma through inner child healing, ancestral wisdom, and also collective healing. And we host our membership in school. This is where I will walk you through Filipino psychology frameworks like the fried egg, the banga, or the kapwa in real life. Plus, you will also heal alongside other Filipinos across the globe. And I will put the description in the link below too. And now that we've talked about boundaries, you might be wondering, what about the everyday comments we hear in our families? The ones that seem so small but cut deep. In my next video, we're going to unpack the phrase, ang taba mo, why it leaves long-lasting scars, and how Filipino inner child healing can help us break free from cycles of body shame. I'll see you in the next one.